Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I am so excited because it is like 85 degrees outside, full sunshine, and I am filming some videos, and then I'm going to the pool, and then I'm going to come back and film my vlog, and then I'm going to finish watching Survivor Season 2 tonight, and so it's like a perfect day today. It's like a perfect day. And I'm just relaxed and having so much fun. I just got done filming a review of my favorite coffee in the entire world, my favorite K-Pod coffee. And so I thought that I would read some meditations today to get myself centered and to see what the world is speaking to us, the universe is speaking to us, more importantly, what Melody Beatty is saying to us. So I brought out both the Melody Beatty books, The Language of Letting Go, and also Journey to the Heart, which are two of my favorite meditation books of life. I try to save these. It's interesting because I have about 5 or 6 meditation books that I read pretty much every single day, and definitely Language of Letting Go was one that for years and years and years I read every single day, long before I ever started on this channel. And Journey to the Heart was one of them as well, but I didn't always read this one. But The Language of Letting Go I pretty much read every single day. This is my hands down favorite daily affirmation book of life. It's the sister book to Codependent No More, which Codependent No More just completely changed my life and my perspective on my relationships with people, and how I validate myself through my relationships with other people, and how I define those relationships and what my role is in that relationship and things like that. And you know, it's interesting, and I haven't even looked at the meditations today, so obviously this has a lot to do with codependency, so it might, but if it has something to do with codependency, it'll be funny that I'm saying this. But I was sober, you know, like 4 or 5 years, and I say this a lot to a lot of different people. Maybe it wasn't that long, I don't know, but I was recommended the book Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. And at that time, I would say the book that had most impacted my life was the basic text of the 12-step program that I'm in. It had most impacted my life in how I look at things and taking responsibility for things in my life, cleaning my side of the street up, and just in my perspective. And it had changed my life. Literally, working steps had changed my life, right? And so when I read Codependent No More, I started telling people, I was like, this book has equally really impacted me in a positive way and really impacted change in a positive way. And to this day, I can still remember like lines that I read in that book, you know, that I can remember certain things that it said, and I just am like, wow, like it was like a wake-up call for me. And I feel like in today's world, codependent or codependency is like this nasty term. Like when we say it, it's like, you know, like a shameful word. And I think it's really more about, for me, I don't look at it with any negative connotation whatsoever. I look at it as a better way to understand who we are. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to be like the book Codependent No More. I think my codependency came as a result of me growing up in an alcoholic home, and me growing up in chaos, and me making sense out of that chaos, and me being bullied, and things like that, seeking validation from others. I think that was always really important to me, and I think it formed this language of codependency, which is what I spoke for a very, very long time. In her book, when she talks about recovery, she's not talking about recovery from addiction. She's talking about recovery from codependency. And I don't explain that very often. Like in her meditations, when she'll say, now that we're in recovery, she's talking about recovery from codependency. She's talking about recovery from our attachment issues to other people, or our need to define ourselves in relation to other people. And I think in my life, you know, I shared recently about, and I'm not going to share the whole story again because it's redundant at this point, but where I was in marriage counseling. I was in an individual session when we started marriage counseling years ago, and I learned the difference between depending on somebody and choosing to have somebody be in your life, and they're choosing to be in your life, which is so much more powerful, right? Well, that was kind of a turning point for me, because what I really realized was that for so much of my life, ever since I had come out and I allowed myself to publicly, you know, be with a partner and date and things like that, I really validated my existence based on if there was somebody standing next to me. Like, I wasn't good enough unless I had a man standing next to me that felt like I was good enough, or wanted me, or desired me, or wanted to be in a relationship with me, right? It's so interesting because I can remember years and years and years ago, when I met like one of Alex's friends from college. This is probably TMI, but I don't really care. And, like, I met him at first, and this guy's, like, very, very forward. He's a hilarious guy, but he's very, very forward, right? And I remember that, like, Alex and I had been dating for, like, 2 months or something like that. And he said something to me. He, like, kind of, like, looked me up and down. And he looked at Alex, and they were, like, joking, like, before he, like, looked me up and down. He was, like, looking me up and down, like, not, like, in a mean way, but, like, in a joking way. Like, let me just take this guy in for a second, right? And he goes, He's like, now let me see. Is he, like, Mr. Right or Mr. Right now? Is he a keeper? Is he a husband? Or is he just for right now? And I'll never forget, he looked at me and he looked at Alex and he goes, this is a husband. And that for me, like that, hearing that guy say that to me was like the biggest high in the entire world. That somebody thought that I was worth, just by one glance of looking at me, that I was like a keeper, right? And I can remember that moment. And I looked back on that because I like processed things like that people had said to me. I had boyfriends in the past that had said very hurtful things to me, that body shamed me, that made fun of me, that put me down. And, you know, and just recently in talking to my therapist, we were talking about like bullying and we were talking about hurtful words and things like that. And he said something to me. He said, you know, research studies show that ongoing verbal abuse, whether that's in the form of bullying or put downs in the home, if you put your children down or you put your wife or your husband down or your spouse or partner, or your boyfriend, girlfriend, or putting your children down, or coworkers down, or employees down, or friends or neighbors, like that ongoing constant, they have found that research shows that does more harm than singular incidents of physical abuse. And I was like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah. He's like, and so looking back on that, I think it's why my therapist said to me after years of being bullied, has anybody ever suggested to you that you may have suffered PTSD? So I think like one of the most important lessons for me was coming out of this idea that I needed somebody else to validate my existence, right? And that for me is really, it's not the exact definition of codependency, but it's how I understand it, right? Like, I am constantly needing to value myself off of my worth of what somebody else thinks of me. And since I started working on that, I'll tell you, it is one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, right? To say things like, to this day, I still, like, I love compliments. I love, you know, when my husband says nice things to me or my friends or, you know, people around me. Like, I like that positive attention, right? But I have to also realize that that has to come within me or from me. And I think that that's kind of like this thing that we would say when we were younger, right? But like to really believe that truly, like true love has to come from yourself, you know? And you have to know that you're good enough and that you're worthy of everything in this world and you're deserving of everything in this world. I don't know that I really believed that. I think I thought for a long time, because I bought into what all those people were saying to me for 12 years, you know, all the bullies. It wasn't just that they were calling me derogatory names about gay people. It was everything in the book because I was like this dirty person to them, right? And you start believing that. It's like in Pretty Woman when she says the bad stuff is easier to believe. When somebody says something to you long enough, you start to believe it. And then, you know, growing up in an alcoholic home where there's a lot of chaos. And so you think if you knew me, like if you really knew me inside, and then when I started using drugs and alcohol and I wasn't a good person and I didn't treat people right and I didn't treat myself right and I put myself in really risky, dangerous situations. And I've shared some of those in videos. And I think what I thought when I, you know, got sober at first, like it was hard, right? Like I was proud of my sobriety, but at the same time, like I would meet people and they would say things to me like, you're so nice, like you're such a cool person, like I really like spending time with you. And my immediate thought would be, if you really knew me inside, like if you could see me and all the years I grew up and the names that people called me and the situations that I put myself in and the ways I treated people back then, you wouldn't think that about me. Like you wouldn't at all, right? Well, that wasn't anybody else doing that to me. That was me doing that to myself, right? And I had to work that tape out. I had to rewrite that tape. And that's how I think I learned over time how codependent I really was, which I think is when I read that book, it like changed everything about me. That I have very little control over what other people do in my life. I can only control my response and my reaction to that. I have very little control over other people, right? I can choose to set boundaries. That book taught me how to set boundaries, healthy boundaries. That book taught me that it's okay to be codependent, but maybe try to work through it and know your own self-worth and your own self-love. I know that about myself today, you know? I know that I'm deserving of love. I know that I'm deserving of all the good things in the world, and so are you. So anyway, I just wanted to share that before we get into the meditation. That was kind of long-winded, wasn't it? But anyway, all right, so But it felt good to get that out. You know, I think sometimes we don't talk enough about that. It's like, you know, in recovery, we talk about doing this inventory process. And a lot of people, so you do an inventory, that's the 4th step, and then the 5th step is when you share that with somebody, typically a sponsor. And I can remember hearing people be like, oh my God, when I shared my 4th step with my sponsor, I did my 5th step, you know, and you share all these things and you go through them and you look at your part in these things and you resentments and your fears and your conduct, and then you look at your part in that and you see patterns, right? And then you carry that over into step 6 and 7, which is about character defects and having them removed. And then you go into steps 8 and 9, which is about making amends and taking responsibility for the actions of our past and cleaning up our side of the street and, you know, fixing our wrongs and things like that. And, you know, I can remember hearing people say, oh my God, I did my 5th step and I just felt like this spiritual, like, awakening, like it was all gone. In fact, my mom did her 5th step before I did. And I remember when she did it, she like called me afterwards and she said it was the most amazing experience of my entire life. And, you know, her sponsor took her out to this like flowing well place and gave her this rock and all this kind of stuff. And she was like, I just felt so free of all this stuff. And I would hear people say that, like, I just felt so free. Like I did my 5th step and I felt so free. And I can remember doing my 5th step, and I had a wonderful sponsor for it. He later passed away of a heroin addiction, but I can remember doing my 5th step with my sponsor, and I didn't even really say this to him at the time because I don't know that I had the language to use, you know, but I got done with it and I just thought, okay, well, there it is. Like, I'm a piece of shit. Like, there it is, right? Like, it's all out now. I'm a piece of shit and there's the evidence. And I felt that like that for a really long time. And then I remember I met my friend Tanya and we were talking about doing steps, and, you know, this was when we very first met, and she talked about hiding her inventory. Lightning struck her house while she was doing her 5th step. It's a true story. And she hid her inventory because she was so, you know, all this kind of stuff. And she said, I felt the exact same way. She said, I felt worse after I did my 5th step. She's like, but that's what the rest of the steps are for. You know, they help us fix that stuff. That's just putting pen to paper, right? Which is why my sponsor today is so big on not like, yes, we sit down and we do, you know, an inventory and we share those things, but you know, she's really big about putting pen to paper, because when you put pen to paper, you can't shy away from what you see, you know? I think that that's really important. So, all right, anyway, I just wanted to say that because, well, maybe that's just where I'll leave the meditation today, I guess, instead of getting into some long-winded meditation and reading another meditation. Just because you feel some way about yourself from the past doesn't make it true, okay? Just because somebody says something about you, I think this is really important. Just because somebody says something about you doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it fact. Just because they have an opinion about you, or just because they thinking about you, or whatever. I mean, think about all the opinions you have about people. Just because you have opinions about people doesn't make them true. You know, I think a lot of things about people that I've been proven wrong and been like, well, that wasn't true at all, you know? And then, you know, you think positively about somebody and they show you that they're a shit person, or you think negatively about somebody and they show you that they're a really amazing person. I'm surprised on a daily basis by human beings, and I love that about this world, right? And so maybe the lesson is to not have preconceived ideas about people. But I think, you know, one thing I don't talk a lot about on this channel is that we all grow up and have this makeup inside of us, right? Some of us come from loving homes, and maybe those loving homes make us feel like we're not good enough. We're not perfect enough, right? I've met people that feel that way, that feel like nothing that I did was good enough for my family because everything they did was right, you know? Then there were some of us that grew up in very mixed messages homes, like I did, right? Like where my mom was one day, little house on the prairie, loving me, tucking me into bed, and the next day she was drunk, passing out. You don't know what to do with that when you grow up. It's very confusing, right? A lot of us grew up in abusive situations. A lot of us grew up in bullying situations. We had all those words put into us. Well, when you have those words put into your head for long enough, or you're treated a certain way, or you're beat a certain way, you know, or you're looked at as just an object to be used, you start believing that to some degree. You believe that you're a piece of shit, right? And so when you go out into the world and you meet people, whether that's for a job interview or friendship or college or a, you know, new job or wherever, or just somebody on your street, all that's in our heads, right? Like, all that's in our heads. Like, if you knew me, right? Like, if you really knew who I was inside, if you knew all those words that people had called me through the years, all those things that had been done to me, if you knew me, if you saw that, like in a movie, if it was shown to you, you probably wouldn't like me. And I think that many of us walk into the world with that preconceived idea, right? Like, if you knew me, if you saw this movie that I see in my head, right? Which is why it's very important for us to maybe not erase that movie in our head or that tape cassette in our head, but to look at it as a different way. To look at it as innocent people that these things happen to that we did not deserve, right? But here's the choice that we have today. What do we do with it today? I'm a believer in turning my wounds into wisdom. Taking the things that I went through, right? Like, okay, if they happen to me and I just use them as excuses, or I just use them as, you don't understand me, or poor me, right? Like, they serve no purpose. But if I can work through them and gain strength and rewrite the tape, okay, and know that I'm deserving of love today, and I'm a good person today, and I've worked through that stigma that I grew up with, or who I thought I was in the past. Because a lot of things I did weren't good. A lot of the things I did weren't nice, right? So once you work through that stigma and you start rewriting that in your head, then you realize, maybe I'm a little bit of a nicer person than I thought I was. Maybe I'm a little bit better of a person than I thought I was, right? And then you rewrite that tape. So you don't have to present that tape to anybody in the world, but we, to some degree, are that tape, you know? Believe in yourself. Don't believe in the version of yourself that existed 10 or 20, 30 years ago. You're not that person today. Even if you haven't done an ounce of work, the world has changed you, okay? You aren't that person that you were 30 years ago. I'm not going to be held to a standard of somebody that I was 30 years ago when I've done a hell of a lot of work to get through that. And I don't have to prove that to anybody. For a long time, I felt like I had to prove that to people. I felt like I had to show them and say, let me show you what I've done, right? I think the proof is in the pudding. And even if it's not, and that pudding tastes sour to other people, it doesn't really matter to me. And it shouldn't matter to you, right? You know your own self-worth. You're good enough. You deserve good things. I said that to a friend of mine the other day. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she and I were face to face, and I said to her, I said, you are so deserving of good things. Like, you deserve everything in the world. And she just started bawling. And I said, sweetheart, I said, why is that so hard for you to hear? And she said, because everything in my life for the last 40 years, and this is not anybody I've ever talked about in a video, she said everything in the last 40 years has completely gone oppositional to what you just said to me. And I said, well, then we got to change that. You got to start working on that. And I said, I did it. She said, how did you do it? And I said, well, therapy and steps. And, you know, I said, but you can do it too. You can do it too. Know your worth, right? It all starts really small, right? It's like the faith of a mustard seed. It all starts really, really small, you know? It starts with one thing. What's one thing today that you believe is good about yourself? What's just one thing? And for those of you out there that say that you can't find one thing that's good about yourself, dig a little deeper, because I don't believe that. I think that's BS. There's one good thing about you. One. Okay? And then you take that and you build upon it. Build upon it. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. This meditation didn't go, well, it wasn't a meditation because I didn't read one, but this didn't go in the direction that I thought it was going to go, but maybe I needed to say this today. I don't know. Maybe this is the universe speaking to me. Maybe I needed to hear this come out of my own mouth today. Anyway, I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.